The first time Adiz heard it, she thought it was a rat, but rats don't run with the weight of a child. It was a Thursday night, or rather, early Friday morning, when the sound came. The old German wall clock in the parlor had just chimed 12 times, its echo fading into the thick darkness of their compound in Auca. Adiz lay on her mattress, staring at the ceiling fan that hadn't worked in 3 years, listening to her younger sister Obiagili's soft breathing beside her. Then she heard it. Tap, 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 tap. Footsteps, running across the zinc roof. Light footsteps, quick and deliberate, moving from one end of the house to the other. Adiz's breath caught in her throat. She sat up slowly, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs. The footsteps moved across the parlor section of the roof, then toward the back where the bedrooms were. And then they stopped, directly above her room. Adiz stared at the ceiling, her eyes wide in the darkness. The zinc roof was old, installed by her father before he died 7 years ago. Every step on it made noise. When the rain fell, it sounded like 1,000 tiny drums. When cats walked on it during the day, you could hear every careful paw print. But this was different. These footsteps had purpose. She waited, holding her breath, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing. Just as she began to exhale, to tell herself it was nothing, the footsteps moved again, quickly, frantically, running back toward the front of the house. And then silence. Adiz didn't sleep that night. She lay awake until dawn crept through the louver windows, painting the room in shades of gray and gold. Beside her, Obiagili slept peacefully, unaware. When morning came, Adiz told herself it was a dream. But it happened again the next night. And the night after that. By the fourth night, Adiz knew it was real. She had begun to dread sunset, watching the sun disappear behind the palm trees with a growing knot of fear in her stomach. Their compound was quiet at night, too quiet. The only sounds were the crickets, the occasional bark of a distant dog, and now, these footsteps. She hadn't told anyone yet. Not her mother, Mama Obi, who already carried enough burdens. Not Obiagili, who was only 14 and still believed the world was mostly good. Not her older brother Chikwudi, who lived in Lagos and only visited twice a year. Not even Ikena, her uncle who lived in the boys' quarters at the back of the compound. Because how do you tell people that someone, walks on your roof every night at midnight? They would think she was going mad. Or worse, they would believe her. Adiz was 23 years old, and she had learned that silence was sometimes safer than truth. After her father died, Papa Obi, a gentle man who sold spare parts at Nkwo Market, her mother had struggled to keep the family together. The house they lived in was Papa's legacy, a modest 4-bedroom bungalow with cream-colored walls that had faded to a dusty yellow, a small parlor with worn furniture, and that distinctive zinc roof that caught every sound from heaven and earth. Mama Obi sold akra and bread in the mornings and worked as a cleaner at the local primary school in the afternoons. Obiagili was in SS3, preparing for her WAC exams. Chikwudi sent money when he could, but Lagos was expensive, and he had his own family now. Adiz herself had finished her national diploma in business administration 3 years ago, but jobs were scarce. She helped her mother in the mornings and did small tailoring jobs in the afternoons, sewing children's clothes for neighbors. They survived. That was the word Mama Obi used, we survive. But now, something was threatening even that fragile peace. On the 7th night, Obiagili woke up. Adiz saw her sister's eyes open in the darkness, saw the confusion turn to fear as the footsteps ran across the roof. They were louder tonight, heavier, more insistent. The zinc creaked under the weight. Ada, Obiagili whispered, using Adiz's nickname. What is that? Shoo, Adiz said, reaching for her sister's hand. Don't be afraid. But Obiagili was already trembling. The footsteps moved across the roof, pausing here and there, and then, as always, they stopped directly above their room. Both sisters stared at the ceiling, holding hands in the darkness. This time, something else happened. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was scratching at the zinc, right above their heads. Not the random scratch of a tree branch or an animal. This was deliberate. 3 long scratches, then silence. Ada, I'm scared, Obiagili breathed. I know. The scratching stopped. The footsteps moved again, running frantically across the entire roof, back and forth, as if searching for something. Or someone. Then they were gone. Obiagili clung to Adiz the rest of the night, and neither of them slept. In the morning, Adiz climbed the ladder they kept behind the house and went up to check the roof. Her hands shook as she gripped the rusty metal rungs, pulling herself up until she could see the expanse of zinc stretching before her. The roof looked normal, old, rust-colored in places, but normal. No footprints, no marks, no scratches that she could see. But as she turned to climb down, something caught her eye. In the corner of the roof, where it overhung the back bedroom, her room, there was a small pile of sand. Not dirt or dust, but sand. Fine, white sand, like the kind they used in construction, or the kind found at the riverbank. Adiz's blood ran cold. In Igbo tradition, sand was used for many things. Some good, some not good at all. She climbed down quickly, her mind racing. When she reached the ground, she found Ikenna standing there, watching her with his arms crossed. Her uncle was a thin man in his late 40s, with gray threading through his hair and a face that always looked tired. "Adiz," he said slowly, "what are you doing on the roof?" I heard something," she said carefully. "I wanted to check." "What did you hear?" She hesitated. Ikenna had lived in the boys' quarters for 3 years now, ever since his wife left him and took their children to Enugu. He kept to himself mostly, drinking palm wine in the evenings and occasionally helping Mama Obi with repairs around the house. "Footsteps," she finally said. "At night, on the roof." Ikenna's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Fear? "When did this start?" he asked. "About a week ago." He nodded slowly, looking up at the roof. "Every night?" "Yes, at midnight." For a long moment, Ikenna said nothing. Then he looked at her, and his voice was very quiet. "Has it stopped above your room?" Adiz's heart skipped. "How did you know?" "Because," Ikenna said, his jaw tightening, "it stops above mine too." They gathered in the parlor that evening, Adiz, Obiageli, Mama Obi, and Ikenna. The room was small, with a brown sofa that sagged in the middle, 2 wooden chairs, and a small center table covered with a lace cloth. On the wall hung a portrait of Papa Obi in his youth, smiling in a way he rarely did in his later years. Mama Obi sat in her usual chair, her wrapper tied around her waist, her face creased with worry as Adiz explained what had been happening. When she finished, her mother was silent for a long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" Mama Obi finally asked, her voice heavy with hurt. "I didn't want to worry you, Mama. You already have so much. I am your mother, Adiz. You should have told me." "I'm sorry, Mama." Obiageli spoke up, her voice small. "It's true, Mama. I heard it too. Last night. And there was scratching." Mama Obi closed her eyes, pressing her fingers to her temples. "Chinik," she whispered. "God." Ikenna leaned forward. "Nwanem," he said, addressing his sister-in-law. "I have also heard these footsteps. They started for me about 2 weeks ago. At first, I thought it was just the roof settling or animals. But it is neither of those things." "What is it then?" Obiageli asked, her eyes wide. No one answered. "We need to call someone," Adiz said. "A dibia. Someone who understands these things." Mama Obi shook her head. "We don't have money for that kind of thing, Ada. You know this." "But Mama. And besides," Mama Obi continued, her voice rising slightly, "I don't want people saying things. You know how they talk in this community. If we bring a dibia here, by tomorrow the whole of Aka will be saying we are into witchcraft, or we have offended our ancestors, or—" "Better they talk than we die," Ikenna interrupted, his voice sharp. The room fell silent. "Die?" Obiageli whispered. "Uncle, what do you mean?" Ikenna looked at Mama Obi, then at the girls. "There are stories," he said slowly. "In our family. Things that happened long ago. Before you were born. Before even your father and I were born." "What kind of stories?" Adiz asked. Ikenna stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening compound. "Our grandfather," he began. "Papa's father, he was a wealthy man. He had land, money, influence. But he was also a hard man. A wicked man to those who crossed him." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "They say he did things, bad things, to protect his wealth, to gain power. And they say that before he died, he made arrangements. To make sure his wealth stayed in the family. To make sure certain things were watched over." "What things?" Mama Obi asked, her voice barely audible. "I don't know all the details," Ikenna admitted. "Papa never spoke about it. But I remember when I was a boy there was an incident. A cousin of ours, Papa's cousin, he tried to sell some of the family land without permission. The land our grandfather left behind." "What happened?" Adiz asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "He heard footsteps on his roof," Ikenna said, turning to face them. "Every night. For 3 weeks. On the 21st night, he went mad. Started screaming about a child on his roof. They found him in the morning, dead. The doctors said it was a heart attack, but what? Obiagili pressed. His eyes were still open, and they say he looked terrified. The room was very quiet. Outside, a dog began to bark in the distance. Why is this happening now? Adiz asked, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. We haven't done anything. We haven't tried to sell any land. We're just trying to survive. Ikenna came back to his chair and sat down heavily. That's what I've been trying to understand. But today, when you mentioned the sand on the roof, he trailed off, looking at Mama Obi. Nwanem, have you made any agreements recently? Borrowed money from anyone? Made any promises? Mama Obi's face went pale. Mama, Adiz said. What is he talking about? Her mother's hands trembled as she gripped the arms of her chair. She started, then stopped. I didn't know what else to do. Mama, what did you do? Tears began to fall down Mama Obi's cheeks. Obiagili's school fees, she said. For her final year. They said if we didn't pay, she couldn't write her exams. And Chikwudi couldn't send money this time, and we had nothing, and What did you do, Mama? Adiz repeated, kneeling beside her mother's chair. There was a woman, Mama Obi sobbed. Mama Ngozi. From the market. She's a moneylender. She offered to loan me the money, but the interest was very high, and I couldn't pay it back on time. She came last week, demanding payment, and when I said I needed more time, she laughed. She said, Mama Obi's voice dropped to a whisper. She said your father owed her family a debt from long ago. She said it was time to collect. The pieces began to fall into place in Adiz's mind, forming a picture she didn't want to see. What debt, Mama? Papa never mentioned any debt. I don't know, Mama Obi wept. She wouldn't tell me. She just said the debt would be paid, one way or another. Ikenna cursed under his breath. And that's when the footsteps started. It wasn't a question. They didn't sleep that night. All 4 of them stayed in the parlor, the lamp burning low, casting long shadows on the walls. They talked and prayed, and tried to make sense of what was happening. At 11:45 p.m., Ikenna went to his quarters and returned with a bottle of anointing oil he said a pastor had given him years ago. They rubbed it on the door frames and windows, praying in Igbo and English, calling on God and Jesus, and every saint they could remember. At 11:58 p.m., the compound fell silent. Even the crickets stopped chirping. At midnight, the footsteps began. But this time it was different. This time they were louder, angrier. The zinc roof rattled and shook as things ran across it. Not one set of footsteps, but many. Racing back and forth in a frenzy. Obiagili screamed and buried her face in her mother's lap. Mama Obi held her, rocking and praying. Ikenna stood by the door, his fists clenched, his face grim. Adiz walked to the center of the room and looked up at the ceiling. Who are you? She called out, her voice strong despite her fear. What do you want from us? The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It was heavy, oppressive, like the air before a storm. And then very softly they heard it. A child's voice. The debt must be paid. The voice came from above, from the roof, high-pitched and strange, as if it belonged to someone very young. But there was something wrong with it, something hollow and cold. The debt must be paid. The debt must be paid. The debt must be paid. It repeated the phrase over and over, growing louder each time, until it wasn't one voice but many voices, dozens of children chanting in unison. Obiagili's screams joined the chorus. Mama Obi clutched her daughter, tears streaming down her face. Ikenna pressed his hands over his ears. But Adiz stood firm. What debt? She shouted. Tell us. What debt? The chanting stopped abruptly. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a single set of footsteps walked slowly across the roof, directly above Adiz's head. And the child's voice spoke again, clearer this time. Blood for land. Land for blood. Your grandfather's promise. 7 children for 7 acres. 5 have been paid. 2 remain. Adiz's legs nearly gave out. 7 children. 5 paid. 2 remain. She looked at Obiagili, 14 years old, her whole life ahead of her. She looked at Ikenna's face and saw the same horror she felt. No, Adiz said, her voice shaking now. No, we won't let you take her. We won't let you take anyone. The footsteps moved again, circling the roof above the parlor. The debt must be paid. Then take something else. Adiz cried. Take the land. Take the house. Take everything we have. But you cannot have my sister. Silence. Then softly, almost curiously, "What will you offer?" Adiz didn't hesitate. "Me. Take me instead." "No!" Mama Obi screamed, lunging forward. "Ada, no. Don't say that." But Adiz was already speaking, the words pouring out of her. "I offer myself in place of my sister. In place of anyone else in this family. Let the dead end with me." The air in the room changed. It grew thick, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. "You do not understand what you offer," the voice said, and now it sounded almost sad. "Once the offer is made, it cannot be taken back." "I understand," Adiz said, though her whole body was shaking. "I accept." What happened next, none of them could fully explain afterward. The lamp went out, plunging the room into darkness. A wind rushed through the house, though all the windows... They heard the sound of many feet running across the roof, faster and faster, until it became a roar like thunder. And then suddenly everything stopped. The lamp flickered back to life. The air returned to normal. The compound was quiet again, the crickets resuming their song. Adiz stood in the center of the room, pale and trembling. On her right hand, on her palm, there was a mark. A small, raised scar in the shape of a spiral. "Ada," Obiagili whispered, staring at the mark. "What have you done?" Adiz looked at her family, her mother, her sister, her uncle, and tried to smile. "I did what Papa would have done," she said. "I protected us." But deep down, she knew the truth. The debt was no longer on the family. It was on her alone, and she had no idea what that meant. The footsteps didn't come back that night, or the next night, or the night after that. Life slowly returned to something like normal. Obiagili went back to school. Mama Obi went back to selling her akra. Ikena stayed in his quarters, drinking less than before. But Adiz changed. The mark on her palm never faded. And sometimes, late at night, she would wake up and hear a child's laughter in the distance. Sometimes she would see shadows moving in the corners of her vision, gone when she turned to look. She told no one about these things. 3 weeks after that terrible midnight, Mama Ngozi came to the house. She looked different somehow, smaller, older. She asked to speak with Mama Obi, and when they sat down, she did something unexpected. She forgave the debt. "I don't know what happened," Mama Ngozi said, her hands trembling. "But 3 weeks ago, my son came to me in a dream. My son who died when he was 7 years old, 20 years ago. He told me to let this family go. He said the debt was paid in a different way. He said..." She looked at Adiz with wide eyes. "He said your daughter saved him." After Mama Ngozi left, Mama Obi turned to Adiz. "What does she mean? What did you do, Ada?" But Adiz couldn't answer. She didn't know herself. Months passed, then a year. The mark on Adiz's palm remained, but nothing terrible happened. She found a job at a small accounting firm in Awka. Obiagili passed her WAC exams with excellent grades and got admission to study medicine at the University of Nigeria in Nsukka. Chukwudi visited more often, and even sent extra money to help with Obiagili's education. Things were getting better, but Adiz never forgot. She never forgot the voice on the roof, the debt that was supposedly paid with 7 children, the 5 who had already been taken. She began to do research, quietly. She talked to old people in the village, people who remembered her grandfather. Slowly, piece by piece, the story emerged. Her grandfather had indeed made a terrible pact. When he was young and ambitious, he had wanted land, 7 acres that belonged to another family. But they wouldn't sell. So he had gone to a powerful Dibia, a native doctor who dealt in dark things. The Dibia had helped him get the land, but the price was steep. 7 children from the other family would die before their time, and their spirits would be bound to watch over the land, ensuring it stayed with her grandfather's descendants. It was a wicked thing, an evil thing, and it had worked. The other family's children died, one by one, over the course of 2 decades. Fevers, accidents, mysterious illnesses. 7 children, all under the age of 15. But what her grandfather didn't know, or didn't care about, was that such evil always comes full circle. The Dibia had warned him. The debt will one day return to your bloodline. The spirits will come to collect. 7 for 7. 5 of her grandfather's descendants had died young over the years. Adiz had uncovered their names, their stories, their 2 short lives. Deaths that the family had accepted as normal tragedies, never connecting them to their grandfather's sin. Obiagili would have been the 6th, and someone else, maybe Adiz herself, maybe a future niece or nephew, would have been the 7th. But Adiz's offer had changed something. By willingly offering herself, by choosing sacrifice over survival, She had broken the cycle of involuntary death. The spirits had accepted a different payment, not her death, but her life. She would live, but she would carry them with her. She would be marked. She would see them sometimes, hear them sometimes. She would be a bridge between the living and the dead. It was a burden, but it was better than death. And it meant her family was free. 2 years after that first night of footsteps, Adiz sat on the veranda of the house, watching the sun set over Akka. The zinc roof above her head was quiet, peaceful in the golden light. Obiageli came out and sat beside her, now a confident young woman in her second year of medical school. She took her sister's hand, the one with the mark. "Does it hurt?" Obiageli asked softly. "Not anymore," Adiz said. "Not in the way you mean." "I never thanked you properly," Obiageli said, her voice thick with emotion. "For what you did that night. For saving me." "You don't need to thank me," Adiz replied, squeezing her sister's hand. "You're my sister. I would do it 1,000 times over." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the evening sounds of the compound. "Ada," Obiageli said eventually, "do you ever regret it?" Adiz thought about the question. She thought about the shadows she saw, the whispers she heard, the weight of the mark on her palm. She thought about the 5 children who had died, and the 2 who would have died if she hadn't acted. "No," she said finally. "No, I don't regret it. Because love is supposed to cost us something, Obi. Real love. The kind that protects. The kind that sacrifices. If it costs us nothing, then what is it worth?" Obiageli leaned her head on her sister's shoulder, and they watched the sun disappear together. Above them, the zinc roof was silent. But sometimes, on quiet nights, if you listen very carefully, you could hear something like laughter. Children's laughter. Not frightening or cold, but free. Released from their bondage by an act of willing love. The debt had been paid, but not in the way anyone expected. And in the end, that made all the difference. Years later, when Adiz became a mother herself, she would tell her children this story. Not to frighten them, but to teach them. She would tell them about her grandfather's sin and the price of greed. She would tell them about the footsteps on the zinc roof and the spirits of children crying for justice. She would tell them about fear and courage, about debt and payment, about the choices we make in our darkest hours. But most importantly, she would tell them about love. Real love, she would say, is not just words or feelings. It's action. It's sacrifice. It's standing between danger and the people you care about, even when you're terrified. It's saying, "Take me instead," and meaning it with your whole heart. Her children would look at the mark on her palm with wonder and ask if they would ever have to make such a choice. "I hope not, my darlings," she would say, pulling them close. "I hope not. But if you do, I pray you have the courage to choose love. Always choose love. Because in the end, that's the only thing that can break the chains of the past and set us all free." And the children would nod, not fully understanding yet, but holding the lesson in their hearts. Above them, in whatever house they lived in, whatever zinc roof covered their heads, there would be only peace. Because some debts, once paid with love, stay paid forever. This story teaches us several profound truths. The sins of the past can haunt the future. Our ancestors' choices, good or bad, can affect generations. We must be conscious of the legacy we leave behind and work to heal the wounds of the past rather than perpetuate them. Silence and secrecy allow darkness to grow. Adiz's initial reluctance to share her fear nearly cost everything. When we face troubles, whether spiritual, emotional, or physical, we must speak up. Shame and fear of judgment should never stop us from seeking help. True love requires sacrifice. The greatest love is not comfortable or convenient. It demands that we put others before ourselves, that we stand in the gap, that we say, "Take me instead," when those we love are in danger. Greed and wickedness always have consequences. Adiz's grandfather thought he could cheat his way to prosperity, but his evil actions set in motion a chain of death and suffering. We must earn our success honestly and treat others with justice and compassion. Willingness to sacrifice can break generational curses. Adiz's voluntary offer transformed the nature of the debt. When we face our family's demons with courage and love, we can end cycles of pain that have lasted decades. Community and family are our strength in dark times. When the truth finally came out, the family faced the terror together. We are never meant to bear our burdens alone. There is always hope, even in our darkest nights. When the footsteps first came, there seemed to be no escape. But through courage, love, and faith, they found a way through. No matter how terrifying the night, the dawn always comes. May we all have the courage of Adiz when our time of testing comes. May we choose love over fear, sacrifice over self-preservation, and truth over comfortable lies. And may we never forget, the debts we refuse to pay with money and power, we may one day be forced to pay with something far more precious. Choose wisely, love deeply, and never make promises in the darkness that your children will have to pay for in their own blood.